The Arizona sun was dipping below the mountains, casting vibrant hues of orange and purple across the sky. Michael Carter, a 40-year-old former soldier, trudged slowly toward the local animal shelter. His well-worn boots echoed on the pavement, each step a testament to the heavy journey he'd endured since leaving the military 3 years ago. Despite his efforts to fill the void through various jobs and therapy sessions, nothing seemed to bridge the emptiness inside him. His faithful German shepherd, Max, the dog who had stood by him during perilous missions, had been sidelined after sustaining an injury, forcing an early retirement from service. The shelter was modest, with rusty fencing and improvised dog houses scattered around. The sharp scent of disinfectant mingled with the occasional bark, creating a chaotic yet hopeful atmosphere. Michael was there because his younger sister, Laura, believed that another dog could help him navigate the lingering shadows of his past. Initially hesitant, something deep within him compelled him to take this step. As he walked down the narrow aisles, he scrutinized each cage. Some dogs barked eagerly, tails wagging in a bid for attention, while others watched him silently, eyes clouded with sadness. Yet, none of them possessed the unique spark he once saw in Max. Just as Michael was about to turn away, a shelter volunteer approached him. "Mr. Carter, we have a German shepherd in the back that might catch your interest. He arrived a few weeks ago, but he's a bit different." Michael looked up, intrigued. Without exchanging a word, he followed the volunteer to a more secluded section of the shelter. In the farthest corner, there lay a large dog with sleek black and tan fur. His stance was rigid, and his eyes bore the weight of exhaustion. Despite the distance, Michael's heart raced with recognition. "Max," he whispered softly. Max slowly lifted his head, meeting Michael's gaze. But instead of the familiar warmth and eagerness, there was only a vacant stare, no wagging tail, no attempt to approach. It felt as though Michael was just another passerby. "He doesn't know me," Michael murmured, stepping back as a tightness gripped his chest. Yet, gazing at Max for a few more moments, he realized he couldn't abandon this chance at reunion. Standing before the cage, Michael watched as Max, once so lively and determined, now seemed like a mere shadow of his former self. Scars marked his hind leg and one ear, visible reminders of battles fought together. But there was something intangible, an emotional wound, that Michael understood all too well. "He's been through a lot," the volunteer explained quietly. "He was surrendered by someone who couldn't handle his anxiety. Max struggles to trust humans." She hesitated before asking, "Do you know him?" Michael nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was my partner, my best friend." Memories flooded his mind. The rigorous training where trust was paramount, the dangerous missions where Max saved his life countless times, and the lonely nights when Max was his only solace. Now, facing Max, who didn't recognize him, the pain was palpable. Carefully, the volunteer opened the cage. Max watched without moving. Michael knelt down, extending his hand gently. "Hey, buddy, it's me." His voice quivered, yet he kept it soft. Max tilted his head, trying to make sense of the presence, but remained tense. Michael felt a lump form in his throat, knowing rebuilding their bond would be challenging. "Would you like to spend some time with him? We can take him to the play area," the volunteer suggested, aiming to ease the tension. Without a second thought, Michael agreed. In the yard, Max kept his distance, sniffing the air but avoiding direct interaction. Michael observed every move, striving to understand Max's feelings. As dusk settled, he made a resolute decision. "I'm taking him home. No matter how long it takes, I'll bring him back," he declared firmly. His voice resonated with the loyalty they once shared. Both he and Max needed healing, and perhaps this was the start for both. The ride to Michael's home was silent and uneasy. Max lay in the back of the truck on a blanket Michael had prepared. His eyes remained fixed on the passing scenery, avoiding any eye contact. Occasionally, Michael glanced at the rearview mirror, trying to read Max's thoughts. The sense of rejection was heavy, but he understood that their shared burdens made connection difficult. Upon arriving, Michael parked at his modest property on the town's edge. The house was simple, surrounded by a spacious yard with a few trees swaying gently. He opened the truck door and called out to Max, who hesitated. After a few tense moments, Max cautiously stepped down, each movement deliberate, as if evaluating his new surroundings. "Welcome to your new home, boy," Michael said, striving for a cheerful tone despite the underlying uncertainty. Max entered but stood still in the entryway, sniffing the air cautiously, eyes wary of the unexpected change. Determined to make Max comfortable, Michael set up a cozy corner in the living room with a new dog bed, bowls of food and water, and some toys he'd purchased on the way. "This is your spot, Max," he indicated the corner, but Max remained rooted to the spot, ignoring the invitation. Frustration began to weigh on Michael as he prepared his own meal, reminiscing about the days when Max would eagerly run to him, full of energy and unwavering loyalty. That Max was now a shadow of his former self, bearing wounds both visible and invisible. He gazed at Max, still standing and gazing into the distance. "I know how you feel, buddy. I feel just as lost," he whispered, more to himself than to Max. That night, hoping to provide a sense of security, Michael left his bedroom door ajar, hoping Max would feel safe enough to approach. Instead, he heard the soft sound of paws on the floor. Max didn't come forward, but instead lay down near the bedroom door, maintaining a safe distance. Michael smiled softly in the dark, seeing it as a small yet significant step toward something greater. The following morning, Michael awoke to the gentle sound of footsteps in the hallway. Max was perched near the door, ears alert, silently observing him. A flicker of hope ignited within Michael. Perhaps something familiar was stirring in Max's mind. "Good morning, Max," he greeted, stretching and forcing a smile. Yet, Max merely glanced away and retreated to the corner, steadfast in his determination to rebuild their connection. Throughout the day, Michael endeavored to interact with Max. He tossed a tennis ball towards him, but Max showed no interest. He placed a fresh bowl of food nearby, yet Max only approached it after Michael had left the room. Each attempt at closeness was met with cold indifference. Understanding that it was more than mere rejection, it was fear, distrust, and perhaps lingering pain, Michael remained patient. That afternoon, Michael decided to try a different approach. He retrieved a worn military jacket he had kept in an old box in the closet, the same one he had worn during missions. With Max donning the jacket, the familiar scent of earth, sweat, and battlefield grime enveloped him. "Let's see if you remember this, buddy," he said, taking the jacket to the backyard where Max was. Max inspected the jacket with curiosity, tilting his head slightly. Michael hoped this would spark a memory. He threw the jacket onto the ground, giving Max space to approach. Max sniffed the fabric, his nostrils flaring as he processed the scent. For a fleeting moment, his eyes seemed less vacant. But then he withdrew, tail low. Michael sighed, feeling his hope wane once more. That evening, sitting on the porch, Michael watched Max lying in the backyard, eyes fixed on the stars. "I'm not giving up on you," he spoke aloud, as if addressing the night sky. "You didn't give up on me when I needed you most, and I'm not giving up now." He recognized the enormity of his request, yet he believed their bond endured beneath the layers of trauma. As the night grew colder, Michael decided to give Max the space he needed. He went inside, leaving the back door open, and settled into bed. Hours later, the sound of paws scratching the floor drew him out of sleep. At the foot of the bed, he found Max lying there, eyes half closed. Without a word, Michael smiled in the darkness, sensing the distance between them was gradually closing. It was a small victory, but enough to reignite his determination. In the days that followed, tiny moments of progress began to emerge, breaking through the walls of distrust between Michael and Max. On a Monday morning, as Michael was chopping wood in the yard, he noticed Max observing him from a distance, head tilted inquisitively. The German Shepherd kept his tail down, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Michael paused, wiped the sweat from his brow, and reached out to Max. "Want to help out, buddy?" he asked playfully. Max didn't approach, but didn't look away either. Later that day, during a walk around the yard, Michael picked up a stick and tossed it lightly forward. To his surprise, Max took a few tentative steps toward the stick, stopped, and then returned to his spot. Michael chuckled. "Ah, so you remember how to play. You're just pretending you don't," despite Max's shy response. That moment felt like a breakthrough. On Tuesday, Michael decided to take Max for a walk. He found Max's old ID tag stored away, cleaned it, and attached it to a new collar. "Let's go for a walk," he announced, adjusting the leash. Max hesitated as Michael opened the gate, his eyes scanning the outside world as if perceiving it as hostile. Nevertheless, with a gentle tug, Michael coaxed him out. During their walk, Max remained tense and alert, constantly sniffing the air and staying rigid as if anticipating danger. Noticing this, Michael spoke calmly. "You don't need to be like that, buddy. We're safe here." He knew his words meant little to Max, but he held on to the hope that a calm demeanor would make a difference over time. As they headed home, an unexpected moment occurred. While removing Max's leash, the dog approached and sniffed Michael's hand. Standing still, Michael felt his heart race. "That's it, Max," he murmured, attempting to conceal his emotions. Max lingered, exploring Michael's scent for a few seconds before pulling away. To Michael, this small gesture signified a change within Max. That evening, as Michael prepared dinner, Max lay on the rug near the kitchen. It wasn't a direct invitation for affection, but the proximity was enough for Michael to sense they were on the right track. He glanced at Max and whispered, "I think we're becoming friends again, huh?" Max didn't respond, but his eyes seemed less distant, hinting that a part of him was beginning to recognize the man who had once been everything to him. The next morning was overcast, with mist enveloping the yard like a shroud. Michael woke early as usual, but found Max already awake, sitting by the living room window. The German shepherd stared out, seemingly lost in thought. Michael approached cautiously, understanding that every interaction required immense patience. Remembering something, he asked softly, though he knew Max wouldn't answer. After breakfast, Michael decided to do something special for the day. He retrieved an old wooden box from the closet, filled with mementos from his military service. Medals, photos, letters, and among them, a worn-out rubber ball that Max had loved during breaks in the field. Holding the ball, Michael felt the weight of their shared memories. He went to the yard, tossed the ball to the ground near Max. Max's body immediately tensed as he sniffed the air, sensing the familiar scent buried deep within his memories. For a few seconds, it seemed Max was about to ignore it, but then he stepped forward, sniffed the ball hesitantly, and then stepped back again. Michael watched silently, noticing Max's internal conflict. "You remember this, don't you?" he asked almost pleadingly. That day, something shifted during lunch. Max stayed closer to Michael, following his every move. For the first time, he accepted food directly from Michael's hand. Astonished, Michael maintained his composure, moving slowly and carefully as Max ate, keeping his eyes locked on him, a sign of burgeoning trust. Later, Michael sat on the porch, spinning the rubber ball between his fingers. "Remember when you brought me this thing in the middle of the night because you couldn't sleep?" He chuckled softly, recalling how Max used to insist on playing even in tense moments. "You were so stubborn. Still are, I guess." Tossing the ball gently across the yard, Michael didn't expect a reaction. To his delight, Max perked up his ears and followed the ball with his eyes, though he didn't catch it. That night, as Max lay near Michael's bed, the distance between them continued to diminish. It wasn't just physical closeness. Something deeper was unfolding. Both were still ensnared in their own pain, but now they were beginning to share the burden together. Before turning off the lights, Michael looked at Max and said, "We're almost there, partner. We're almost there." The next morning, sunlight streamed brightly across the backyard as Michael prepared for another day with Max determined to make further progress. He decided to recreate one of their old training routines. With a whistle around his neck and a rope in hand, Michael hoped the exercise would spark a memory buried beneath trauma and time. "Let's take it slow, buddy," he said as he moved to the center of the yard. Max followed at a safe distance, eyes attentive to every movement. Michael blew the whistle and issued a simple command, "Sit." To his amazement, Max slowly lowered his body and sat. "Good boy," Michael exclaimed, a mix of surprise and joy in his voice. Picking up the rubber ball, Michael threw it a bit farther. "Fetch, Max," he called, aiming to reignite the energy of the past. Max hesitated, eyeing the ball thoughtfully. Standing still, Michael waited patiently. After a few seconds, Max took steps toward the ball, paused, and finally picked it up with his mouth. A shiver ran down Michael's spine. "You did it, buddy." As Max returned with the ball, something unexpected happened. He dropped it at Michael's feet and looked up, his eyes reflecting a spark of recognition that Michael hadn't seen in years. Overwhelmed with emotion, Michael kept his composure, not wanting to startle Max. This moment became a pivotal point for the rest of the day. Max began to follow Michael around the house more closely and even allowed small gestures of affection. When Michael sat on the couch, Max would lie on the floor beside him, something he'd never done before. It wasn't just the training or the familiar items. It was as though Max was gradually lowering his defenses and allowing Michael back into his life. That night, while organizing his belongings, Michael stumbled upon an old photo of him and Max in the field, taken on the day they completed a challenging mission. Both looked exhausted, yet there was a proud gleam in their eyes. Michael placed the photo on the bedside table and showed it to Max. "Look at this, buddy. We made one heck of a team, didn't we?" Max gazed at the photo for a few seconds before lying down next to Michael, closer than he had ever been since moving into the house. Thunder rumbled in the distance as rain began to pour over the backyard. Michael watched Max stand near the porch, nose pointed toward the stormy horizon, seemingly mesmerized by the lightning's dance and the rain's rhythmic drumming. Holding a coffee mug, Michael approached slowly. "You've always loved storms," he murmured to himself. Max turned his head, eyes meeting Michael's for the first time in weeks. There was a change in his gaze. Not the complete barrier of distrust that had once kept them apart, but hesitation mingled with a spark of curiosity. A small sign that something inside Max was shifting. Michael's heart raced with hope, knowing there was still a long road ahead, but feeling strengthened by moments like these. Determined to seize the opportunity, Michael retrieved the old military whistle from the cabinet. He knew it was a gamble, but perhaps the familiar sound could trigger a reaction in Max returning to the porch. He blew the whistle twice, the same pattern used during missions to call Max. The German shepherd snapped to attention, ears perked up. For a fleeting moment, Michael almost believed Max would sprint to him like before, but instead, Max took a hesitant step toward him before stopping again. The spark in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a shadow of doubt. He lowered his head, battling an internal struggle. Michael sighed deeply, placing the whistle aside. "I didn't want to force you to relive anything too painful. It's okay, buddy. We'll go at your pace." As the rain intensified, Michael prepared a dry blanket and a fresh bowl of water for Max, placing them in a corner of the room. Choosing not to push further, he sat on the floor near Max without trying to get too close. Simply being present was his way of showing Max he wasn't alone. Gradually, Max began to relax, lying down on the rug and casting furtive glances toward Michael. As night enveloped the house, Max did something unexpected. He slowly approached, heavy breaths echoing in the quiet room. Stopping just inches away from Michael, he sniffed around the veteran, as if gathering the courage to take a significant step. Then, with hesitation, Max gently touched Michael's hand with his nose. The brief contact was enough to make Michael's heart soar. "You're coming back to me, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Refraining from petting Max to avoid disrupting the fragile moment, Michael simply stood still, allowing Max to set the pace. When Max finally pulled away, Michael felt a surge of relief and hope. It was a small victory, but to him, it symbolized reclaiming their lost bond. That night, amidst the raging storm outside, Michael found Max lying at the foot of his bed. The dog wasn't entirely relaxed, but he seemed less distant than before. For Michael, this was all the confirmation he needed. The bond they shared, despite the trauma and pain, still existed and was ready to be rebuilt. The following morning, the sun rose brightly, bathing the yard in a golden glow. Michael sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching Max slowly traverse the wet grass. Something felt different. Max's movements were less tense, and for brief moments, he resembled the loyal partner Michael remembered. Determined to continue their progress, Michael picked up the old whistle once more, holding it thoughtfully. It was a risky move, but he knew he had to try. Blowing 2 short whistles, the same ones used the previous night, Michael watched as Max lifted his head almost instantly. His ears stood upright, and his entire body seemed alert. Remaining calm, Michael didn't show any signs of impatience or excessive expectation. "Come on, buddy," he encouraged softly. To his astonishment, Max took a few confident steps toward him, eyes fixed on the whistle. A lump formed in Michael's throat as he observed Max approaching with newfound assurance. Max stopped in front of him, sniffing the air as if searching for something familiar. With deliberate movements, Michael picked up the rubber ball he had used earlier. Holding it in front of Max for a moment, he then gently tossed it to the side. For a split second, Max stood still, but something shifted in his demeanor. With an unexpected burst of energy, Max sprinted after the ball and returned, placing it at Michael's feet. Standing there, eyes brimming with tears, Michael felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. "That's it, buddy. I knew you were still in there," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Picking up the ball again, he repeated the gesture, and this time, Max ran even faster, his tail wagging slightly as he returned. It felt almost magical. Weeks of patience and perseverance were finally bearing fruit. Every step Max took was a triumph over the traumas they both carried. That night, for the first time since Max's arrival, he lay down beside Michael on the couch, his head resting near Michael's leg. Without attempting to speak or move, Michael simply stayed there, letting the silence convey the depth of their reconnection. Gently stroking Max's head, Michael knew that no matter how long it took, he would never give up on the friend who had once saved his life. The next morning began with the cheerful sounds of birds outside, but inside the house, something far more significant was unfolding. Max was at the center of the room, his gaze fixed on Michael, who held a leash in one hand and a military jacket in the other. "Today is the big day, buddy," Michael announced with a hopeful smile. He had decided to take Max to a nearby park, a favorite spot from their days off during training. It was the final test, a chance to see just how far they'd come. During the drive to the park, Max seemed more at ease than ever. He sat comfortably in the back seat, his head slightly leaning out the open window, letting the breeze ruffle his fur. Michael watched him through the rearview mirror, a mix of pride and relief swelling within him. For weeks, he had fought to reclaim the bond with Max, and now, this moment felt like a significant milestone. "Just like the old times, huh?" Michael mused, not expecting an answer. Upon arriving at the park, Michael released Max's leash and grabbed the rubber ball once more. The German Shepherd stood still, surveying the surroundings. Instead of hesitating as he had before, Max immediately ran toward the ball as soon as Michael threw it. They spent hours playing together, as if the passage of time and the scars of trauma had never touched them. Michael felt a deep sense that Max was returning to the dog he once knew, yet he also recognized that both of them had irrevocably changed. They weren't the same as before, but that didn't mean they couldn't forge a new bond. As the afternoon sun began to set, Michael sat on a park bench with Max lying down beside him, head resting on Michael's leg. Gazing out at the horizon, a profound sense of peace washed over him. "I told you I wouldn't give up, Max," he whispered, gently stroking the dog's head. For the first time in years, Michael felt a part of himself had been restored. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a living symbol of everything they had endured and overcome together. As they headed home that evening, Michael understood that the future, though uncertain, would be faced together with Max by his side. Max's unwavering loyalty and courage had found their way back into Michael's heart, and in return, Michael had discovered that patience, love, and determination could heal even the deepest wounds. They were whole once more, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to support and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more touching stories like this. Your presence here really makes a difference.